Someone's going to go for two and get it at some point.
It's 1:42 in the morning.
Yeah, that's all right. Number one. Shocker. Ironton.
Man, give me the Trojans.
There we go. Welcome into Overtime, presented by Perfection One. My name is John Bruce, along with Shayne Combs. Welcome into episode 71 of the flagship podcast of the Southern Ohio Sports Authority, as always presented by Ohio Health. Been a big week this week. We're going to get into plenty of it. We appreciate anyone checking along. As always, whenever we go into these topics, if you are not interested by whatever we're going to say, in the information below the video, you will see timestamps for everything that we talk about throughout the episode. So if you want to click to that and you want to ignore anything we say, it's okay. We appreciate you being here because what was it you always said on SVC Sports Talk? It was like, hey, we're going to talk about golf. If you don't want to hear about golf, just don't listen.
Yeah, fast forward.
Yeah, fast forward, and we'll give you timestamps for anything that we talk about. We'll put it out there exactly what we're going to talk about as well. That way, you know, maybe it's an episode you're not too interested in. I would be interested because we rock. I don't know. So it is a Sunday night. We recorded on a Monday last week. So I'm slightly less tired because we had school last week. So, you know, do you have a good week last week?
Did the other week, because remember we're coming off a crazy week where we had a couple of late nights of volleyball and so forth. Last week still had some really good games and some really good calls, but good week at school, ready for another week. And a lot of our leagues in volleyball are going to start into the second round by the end of this upcoming week. Not all of them, but most of football. If not this week, one more week will be in the league play. So in all seriousness, what you're saying there in the opening is I do think important. You know, you do such a great job with the soccer coverage. I know we both enjoy following those kids in golf. Fall's a busy, busy time. You know, as we get closer to the postseason, we even try to highlight some cross country runners. And it is important, no matter how long we have to go each week, it is important to highlight those kids and get that exposure out there for each and everything. Because you and I, we're like anybody. We have our favorites sometimes, but we just love high school sports and we love covering the kids.
Yeah, it's an outstanding time of the year. Every year is so specific on what there is. So like the fall, there's a ton of stuff and opportunities. It's kind of, even though with fall everything's kind of starting to die and kind of rejuvenate in the spring, but it's really when sports season really kicks into gear because you've got so many options here in the southeast and all over the state as well. We had maybe not the most competitive week 4 in football, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. You can see the scores on the ticker below. We've had some slight technical difficulties. We were, fortunate to come in here tonight to the SOSA studio to be able to record. Um, those things happen, and I know we're not the only ones, but we appreciate anyone that is able to help or get us going at all because we're making phone calls before, and we're not a live show, and we're making phone calls. So I can't imagine the shows that go live. So I know. The fellas down the street do a really good pregame show. There's a nice pregame show out of Portsmouth as well. So I mean, it's we do the post game, and then we do all the interviews and whatnot. So yeah, just I think anyone that's doing the local sports coverage like we are knows how difficult some of the technical stuff can be, and we had Bruce for a long time, not me, but Bruce had for a long time that made it to where we didn't have to do anything on on SEC Sports Talk. But now we've got a couple people like Jacob Wise, Dewey Daly really step up big time for us and making sure things go well. And then even on the coaches call-in show, Christian Spradlin was just he's just trying to do everything to make things work on Friday. Sometimes they don't work, but.
And it does. And listen, I've said countless times, I can sit here and talk sports with you all night. You start asking me to plug in this and plug in that, it's hard to be telling what we'll stream out there. So I'll stay in my lane and just sit here and talk sports with you.
I'm excited for Friday to see hey, if that thing starts, that's a win. because if I'm going down just to help with that, like, yeah, because we're losing Kenneth for the week. He's a big part of an important program down at
Oh,
his university, and he's unavailable for the week. So we're gonna get some double Carson action there. But yeah, it should be fun. We'll get into all of that and more. I didn't talk about this before to you, and I don't want to catch you off guard. Currently, the Cubs are 11 games up on the Reds for the last uh, playoff spot. I'm a Cubs fan. You're a Reds fan. With 12 games to go, do you think they can catch the Cubs?
well, they don't have to play the A's anymore,
That's
so
true.
that's a positive. But no.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talent there. I think at some point they're just going to put it all together because, like we kind of talked about, they got some really talented arms. But maybe this is something. We'll get into our discussion here in a minute. Cal Ripken, like how did he go so many years? It's not like he was a small guy. So many years of playing consecutive because we've both seen Ellie De La Cruz. He's just a phenomenal talent player
Mhm.
all around. He never sits. But I think at this point it's kind of obvious he probably needs to sit. So a guy like Cal Ripken, who played for so many consecutive years, how more impressive is that now? Where I know if there's any you get a hangnail, guys are,
Yeah.
you know, probably gonna sit, but back then, guys played a lot more, but at the same time, to play year after year after year after year to be an all-star and at a high level, just how impressive is that?
He does, and I think the connection to high school
Mhm,
sports is we talk about kids being the 2 and 3 and 4 sport athletes and staying active, but taking care of your body and go and look, the greatest athletes in the world, it is a fine line between being durable and playing through injury and going and you mentioned the Cal Ripken and the streak. I'm sure there was a lot of slumps and a lot of different things where, back then they just that's what they did. They played
mhm.
every day. Now, a lot of these guys want to pride themselves in playing in every game for just 1 year.
Yeah,
And look, when you go through slumps or you go through nagging injuries, it's gonna be easy to say. Well, what's funny sometimes is guys that talented can go out at 40, 50, 60% of themselves and still impact the game.
mhm,
Like in the San Diego series, he still impacted the game probably more than anybody in terms of
mhm,
position players in the whole series. So it it is. It's a tough call. It's one of those things where I appreciate guys who show up, guys who play hard.
mhm,
Rarely have I doubted his effort throughout the year. So I think there's still a lot to learn from that. But yeah, as you move forward, and I think the lesson again to make a high school, since it's a high school, talk
mhm.
show, the connection for coaches is oftentimes we have to remind ourselves that we have to protect athletes from his or herself.
Right,
I mean,
yeah,
it's one of those things where if you are coaching a competitor, and you ask them, "Can you go?" I would hope the answer from him or her would be, "Well, yeah, coach, I
mhm,
can go." But sometimes you have to be able to step in and recognize how to manage that. Maybe it's in an off-season workout, preseason workout, practice schedule, and even playing time in games sometimes.
mhm,
And what makes that hard is it's a results-driven business. You want to win,
mhm,
and those people give you the best chance to win. They want to play, you want them to
mhm.
play, and yeah, it's not easy. It's not a perfect formula.
Well, and as somebody that goes around the country to these different games, you wanna see the best players play. But at the same time, you kinda have to understand it at certain times, so, um, yeah, we as a Cubs fan, we saw Kyle Tucker play through he sat out, like, 2 games because he jammed his wrist. Turns out he's playing for 2 months
Yeah,
with a broken wrist,
yeah.
and you just
Well,
so
I
they
heard I talked to not to get off subject too much, but I talked to a family, it's been about a month ago. They have 3 kids, and daughter really wanted to see Caitlin Clark play. They
Mhm,
they they had probably by the time they got their tickets, the trip, they're gonna have to get a hotel, they were
mhm,
gonna have to drive and eat and do all those things. They said it's probably gonna be anywhere from an $800 to $1,000 trip. Well, obviously, she didn't play.
mhm,
They still got to
yeah,
go over. They actually, it all was well because, Caitlin Clark was available and signed some autographs and
mhm,
things like that.
yeah.
But like that's an example of what you're talking about is like when you get to that higher level, it's you want those people to be available and you appreciate when they are.
Yeah, and that's and that's a league that needs the stars to be available. I
Sure.
know two of the big young ones were out for a majority of the season for that league. So,
Hurts.
yeah, and that, like you said, it hurts, but that's the type of stuff you need too,
Yeah.
though, is the availability
Yeah.
to show for the players to show we appreciate you being here. Sorry I can't play, but we appreciate you being here. So I'm glad to hear that from her as well. So kind of moving into our discussion, and maybe this could be something that could lead to injuries in certain aspects, but pace of play. So I know you said you saw a discussion about this online. So pace of play, depending on the sport, does it matter? Why? How does it, how to make it work? How do we pick up the pace? Because, these things can change things up pretty quick for people. People can get distracted very quickly.
It really can. The discussion was generated through a Facebook post where someone was talking about volleyball and about how, it was taking so long the ball would bounce away. And, there was a discussion about how line judges are supposed to stay put, the kids are supposed to go get it, and the kids bring it back. And, long story short, no pun intended,
Mhm.
is to how can we move things along? And it got us thinking, and I've been in a lot of conversations this week in preparation for the show. And man, the conversations have been really fun. I've reached out to a lot of different people, fans that have been involved with kids in a lot of sports and coaches. And, you think about in high school golf, we have like a double par sometimes. They'll implement double par, pick it
Yeah,
up.
I need one.
Volleyball, volleyball. We were just down at Guy Academy a couple of weeks ago. They
Mhm,
had the ball retrievers that you'd see at the higher levels of volleyball, like your state
mhm,
tournament. You talk about picking up the pace of the night and keeping it going. um, Football running clock, basketball running clock, baseball, they've implemented, pitch clock and, putting people out, ghost runners out on second base in the 10th inning so we don't play 14, 15
mhm,
inning games like we used to grow up with. And, even at the younger levels, they have the run rule
mhm,
for baseball, softball, and there's been questions, should that go? Um, we were part joking the other night, but I got talking to some volleyball people. We were at a triple header where the two JV matches went 3 sets, right?
mhm,
It pushed the start of the varsity back, and a lot of people were talking about should every level lower than varsity play the third set to
mhm,
15. And I thought one person made a really intelligent volleyball comment. It wasn't even about pace of play. They said, really all you're doing is cutting that back 10 points,
mhm,
but it would get the kids used to playing that sprint to
mhm.
15.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a very intelligent. So my point is, you could argue, debate, whatever word you want to use, just talk sports, which is like what we like to do about these things constantly. But you're right. We live in a microwave society. The days of the bake the bake the supper and,
Mhm,
I said supper right there, dates me, right? Putting the supper in the oven or plugging in the crock pot all day long, that's a thing of the
mhm,
past. As you said, the cell phone, the world of the internet of like, I want the answer, I want it right now. So it is. Now, I've also talked to people. I was in athletic administration for almost 8, 9, 10 years. I've also talked to my brother about it. I've
mhm,
talked to other people. A lot of ADs will tell you it's not their job to entertain. They're not wrong.
mhm,
It's an educational thing at the high school level. It's an
mhm,
extracurricular. But I guess what I would argue as extracurricular meets 2025 in the society we live in, I do think there's something. You and I talked about atmospheres a couple weeks back.
mhm,
There is something to be said about making it fun, making it fast, making maybe fast is the wrong word. Maybe
mhm.
it's efficient.
Yes. I think efficient definitely does work. You mentioned the 14, 15 innings. My favorite baseball game I ever went to was a 15-inning game. So, I mean, and that was a long day.
Get your money's worth.
But yeah, got your money's worth. But yeah, I think, okay, now we're not going to be able to do a pitch clock in high school. Do you think there's a way to limit not the disengagements, but maybe the meetings at the mound, or how many times a player can step out to, look at their coach? Because man, sometimes it's the third base coach that can just slow the game to a complete lull in baseball. Softball is much more efficient. Softball moves quick,
Mhm.
and it has when they do meet, it tends to be faster than in baseball because I feel like softball, I'm trying to think my nicest way to say this about baseball players. more softball players may be more focused on like, hey, this is what I got to do each time. Where baseball players might say, I didn't get that call. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I see where you're going with that. It's interesting, John, because I'm the one thing I've learned in the last 5 to 10 years in sports is, well, why can't we do that? Well, why
Mm,
can't we do that? You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where we certainly can try it. How hard would it be to have the disengagement rule at high school?
mhm,
Well, if you disengage the second time, you don't pick him off, it's a fault. You know what I mean?
right.
Like it's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Now, I'll grant you this: when you get into different clocks and different things, you'd
Mhm,
have to have different ways to keep it on the field and go. One of the biggest things about pace of play, and I know this from my days as AD and now as an administrator, people have no idea how hard it is just to go to a volleyball night and okay, do you have line judges? Do you have a clock
mhm,
keeper? Do you have so now all of a sudden you're going to try to get ball retrieval? Do you have concession stand worker? Do I have
mhm,
someone take the tickets? And you go into all of these different sports and you need those volunteers or you need those people to make it happen.
mhm.
All of a sudden you put a play clock in there in football. We probably need another clock keeper up in the
Yeah.
press box. If you're going to use a shot clock in Ohio someday in basketball, which I kind of hope we do, that's going to take another person that's
Mhm.
trained pretty well to do it correctly to run run the
Yeah.
clock. So it it's all stuff that I'm very open-minded to, and I do think anytime you can make it more efficient, and I think we need to take I know I'm biased, but I think we need to take our lead from volleyball.
Mhm,
No sport has stepped out and taken on more of a dynamic change in the last quarter of a century than volleyball, and I would argue that in return, no sport has been growing
mhm.
faster than volleyball. So I think, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Let's not make it
Yeah.
as harder than it needs to be. I mean,
Well, that's a good point on how quickly it's growing because I was at with family today and I talked about how our biggest probably our biggest girl sport in the Southeast is volleyball, and it's probably up there with our best overall girl sport. Now we had 2 state champions in girls basketball last year, but
softball.
in softball as well, yeah, it's our girl sports have been outstanding, but volleyball, it seems like
Depth of volleyball, I would
depth,
agree with
yeah,
you. Yeah. We've
and
had the elite in other sports,
yeah.
but in terms of depth, it's growing
Well,
rapidly.
and then you have some Division 7 schools with, like, freshman teams, and most JV volleyball, at least in our area, is pretty good. So,
Mhm.
you're not seeing it's not a waste of time. Like, sometimes you see lower levels in other sports, and sometimes it can be kind of a waste of time, so it's you see very competitive as well. So I think that goes back to the how quickly they play, that they've changed the overall build of volleyball. Because I
Mhm.
mean, you had side outs 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and that's changed, and
Well,
it's
they
just
changed the rules in
yeah,
terms of the skill set, which I know some of the older players that drives them nuts. But again, it's probably made the game a little bit more athletic, a little bit faster, a
mhm,
little bit more pace. Keeps the rally alive a
mhm,
little bit longer. You know what I mean? What do you always say in other sports? You almost want the officials to call what they have to call and
mhm,
stay out of the way. Volleyball again is kind of adopted that. So everything we do, I would almost come back to sport of volleyball and said, agree with it or not. That's not what this segment's about in terms of what you agree with or
mhm.
don't agree with. This segment is about give me a sport that has tried to be more dynamic in the last 20 to 25 years than volleyball. I think you'd fail to do
Mhm.
so, and watch how volleyballs continue to grow.
Yeah, I agree completely. Now, one thing when you mentioned pace of play, and I just thought of this, officiating wise. I think volleyball does it very efficiently because you've got the one on the ground that can communicate with the coaches. They typically have a headset, correct, where they can discuss
Yeah.
that. I believe,
Depends what
yeah.
level.
But I saw this in soccer the other day. There was only two officials at a really big match. Should have been three, but only two. But they both had headsets, so they're communicating the entire time. So there was a foul that happened on the complete opposite side of the field. The official on the far side calls it. Verbally says exactly what happened to that other official, and that other official just can tell the player exactly what happened, and then they just pick up and go. Instead of it taking a long time where you have to have a discussion, would football be a little more efficient if they just said, the only way you need to come into this discussion is if you have anything extra to add because sometimes you'll get all of them together, and that can take a long time because you're coming from different positions on the field. Just how important is the communication between everyone, not just officials, but the communication between everyone that can make it more efficient as well.
Yeah, what you're describing with the technology there in volleyball, I've seen that before. It's not as common, it's not as needed, but you make a great point about the officials. And the one point I would say to that is, I don't think we can go to the point where we just blatantly stop calling the game. Like I
Mhm.
go back to the very first night. Remember that brutal first quarter that we
Yes.
had down there with Uniota and Portsmouth. Like
Yes.
that was a long first quarter.
Mhm.
Now that's not the officials' fault. The
Mhm.
teams couldn't line up
Right.
correctly. They couldn't fall. They false start. They jump. You can't let teams just start lining up all sides
Mhm.
all night. You can't let the offense just start jumping
Mhm.
before the snap like
Yeah.
we're watching a fifth grade flag football game. You know what I mean? Like you have to still have rules. So there are going to be times where when I say efficiency, well, that leads to the game itself
Mhm.
too. The point I'm making is once you have the guy lining up off sides, well, that's a pretty basic, hey, offsides, 5 yards, mark it, let's go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, does it take us a half hour to get together, as you say,
Mhm.
call it, mark it? Now, hey, start the play clock again. Is there an efficiency in terms of the way you go? And look, you're always going to have long games. You're going to have a lot of points
Mhm.
scored, or you're going to have penalties. You're going to have a lot of fouls in basketball. The I think the quarter bonus has been a big thing.
Mhm.
So again, can you be dynamic in your rules in the way the game is structured to put things in place to help those types of games still have flow?
And then I've got one more on
Okay.
that. So the other day, I saw it was on a stream, not ours. Actually, it was on a huddle. Like there was a hold and a 15-yard face mask. So they go to the spot of the hold, walk it back 10 yards, and then walked it forward 50. Or it was unsportsmanlike after the play. Like, can we just do the 5 yards on that? Like, just because it's just, I for most officials, shouldn't take long. This official took a while, but I just feel like some of these. I'm trying to think of the exact wording, but some of the ways they have to do things are just very inefficient.
That's exactly where I was going. Like what I would love to hear
It's
from
great
the
to,
official
it's great
there.
to do it by the book, like you have to,
Yes,
because you don't know who's watching.
that's it.
But
What I would love to
change the
know
book.
there, and just in that scenario, but in
Mhm,
all scenarios, sometimes we're mad at what we see when in reality we're mad at the rule or the
mhm,
procedures. So
yeah,
like what I would
procedural.
constantly
That's what it
yeah,
was.
what I would challenge people there is if technically, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know, maybe a high school official could help us out. If
Mhm,
technically, if you are being, evaluated
mhm,
and you are supposed to walk it one way and walk it back the other. Well, that's a kind of an ignorant procedure. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, let's do some math and let's announce it to, hey, we got this, we're going to, okay, and change. So you'll see that a lot of times in today's sports, today's technology. You'll watch something with your favorite team on TV and you'll be like, man, that's a terrible call or this or that. No, actually, it's a terrible rule that
mhm,
was called correctly.
like
You see what I'm saying?
targeting in
Yeah.
college
Yeah.
football. Yeah,
Well,
it's
and
just
there's different things
mhm,
there. Young man in the
yeah,
Notre Dame game last night, I
mhm,
saw that, which really tough call.
yeah,
Now it's going to cost him some significant
right,
playing time.
and
So
like
it is. Sometimes it's not necessarily the way they're doing it or what they're calling. It's what the rule book
mhm.
kind of says, and that's what needs to be changed.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, kind of moving on, we're always looking for different ways to add some discussion as well. So, if we see it online or you see something that you think you'd like us to discuss or you want to get involved in the discussion, um, you can contact either of us on any of our socials, whatever, to let us know. Or if you want to just tag overtime in a
Yeah.
post, um, something you are interested in hearing in the future, we can talk about as well, and maybe we'll learn more. We know some officials who have ended up being kind of high level. May have coached with you. I might have played with them in little league. I don't understand. Sorry, Coxie. I don't understand how you got up that quick. Like he's elevated in a hurry,
Yeah.
but does a really good job and knows all the rules.
And
Uh,
still goes out and does younger level, which
yes,
I think is awesome.
yeah, which I think that is. That is a big key because then it's just going to help those younger kids
Mhm.
learn the rules. Because if you don't know the rules, like as a player, you're going to break them more than
Yeah.
likely. So, moving on to football, week 4 was something. But you know what? It's those weeks happen on occasion where, like I said, if you check out our ticker below, week 4, not a whole lot of close games. Rock Hill and Fairland, I know was a really good one, 33-32. I think they scored multiple times in the last few minutes. And then Fairland had a chance to win with a field goal at the buzzer and missed it. But then, like Ironton plays Canisius, uh, New York comes in. It's supposed to be a really good game, and Zane Williams and the Fighting Tigers just ran all over them. They have a big time recruit coming in, and Williams, I think, was either 2-1 or like 2.5-1 in yardage against him. Really impressive display by the entire Ironton team, which, surprise, surprise, Ironton was impressive. And one of the games where, you were able to see, I saw half of it, almost concussed myself walking upstairs. I don't know if you know that. I was walking up to go help Kenneth with the camera just to just watch the game up top while you and Carson started to call it. Hit my head. He didn't see it. He saw my hat like fly off. And I was like, I got up there. I'm like, man, that was like, I'm not tall. How did I hit my head on anything? And my neck is just not the same. So, yeah, if you see me just like
Well, it goes
turning,
back to that durability thing we
yeah,
said earlier in the show
yeah,
there.
not
You
missing a
you
show.
you weren't gonna miss it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I missed a couple shows this year, so not missing a show for injury. So, that game the other night was our game of the week. Zane Trace at Piketon. Zane Trace 42-6. How impressed were you with Zane Trace?
Very impressed, and I think what it really shows, I use the word complete in the post-game coverage with Carson, who I always enjoy calling football with
Mhm,
there, and the reason I say complete, John, is I think it goes back and it reminds us once again that special teams are just so, so important.
mhm,
If you look at that game, they utilized a variety of special teams to just dominate. It felt like they dominated field position
mhm.
the whole first half. They had a big kickoff return to
Y
start the game. They
y
blocked a punt. Then they placed some kickoffs really strategically, and it just seemed like they lived in four down territory all night. Where Piketon, who did move the
mhm.
football, which I'll talk about here briefly, just it felt like they were facing bigger fields throughout the whole evening.
It felt like that week 1 game where Portsmouth was behind, the 8 ball pretty much the whole game, and then we're getting short punts, so it was getting short fields. Now that was a little more because of the punter instead of what they were able to do. Zane
Right.
Trace, like you said, Brower gets through, gets a block on the punt, big kickoff return from Jaden Higgins to
Yeah.
start the game, and then when you've got, Gunnar McCullough, the most efficient game of the season, going 2 for 2 with 2 long touchdowns. Well, you don't even have to throw the ball, but you've got McCullough can run it. Bryce Johnson is a monster. Jaden Higgins runs the ball. Grady Stewart was all over the field as well. And that's not even mentioning Hudson Williams and not really even saying much about Brower. And
Hartley had the
yeah,
pick
Hartley had the
six as
pick
well.
six. Yeah.
So Stewart had the pick six and caught one on the
Mhm.
receiving side. And yeah, I guess that's why you go back to complete.
Yeah.
I mean, from the word go, kickoff return, solid drive, go punch it in, good kickoff coverage. And then all of a sudden, you get a pick six, and then you're blocking a punt. And before Piketon can even settle into the game, it's like Zane Trace had been able to come at them in three, four, five
Mhm.
different ways. And the athleticism, what I love about the unselfishness of Zane Trace, you get the impression, John, in certain matchups that they probably could go out and throw it 15 or 20 times and throw for
Mhm.
250. I mean, Cole is obviously, we know from all sports, phenomenal
Mhm.
athlete. We know the same thing about Stewart. And yeah, I said on the air the other night, Johnson, as I watched him on film, and I love watching on film because you can really rewind some runs and appreciate some vision and some. He finishes every run with physicality.
Mhm.
So I know this sounds so simplistic, but if he carries it 15 times, no matter what happens on the run, he's probably going to get an extra 15 to 30 yards a night because of how he finishes the run.
And
Every
that
single run has that extra yard or two, like he's almost mad at you. You know what I mean? Like when he hits the
Well,
hole.
and if he hits a DB hard enough, that may end up getting to like a light tackle as well, and
Yeah,
that could break even more because
yeah,
he is so aggressive when he runs. Their line does such a good job.
they do.
Yeah, I was really impressed with what we saw, especially that first half. You mentioned it's 21 nothing, like almost like that, and then Piketon goes down and scores. It felt like they kind of got into the game a little bit more at that point, but
Yeah,
ultimately that pick six late really,
it
really put the
did.
hammer down. But
And I talked about yak, the yards after
mm,
catch, but also the yards after contact. I've heard
mhm,
that used two different ways in
yeah,
football. And on the Zane Trace side, it was the yards after contact. Could the first Piketon defender who would get to a Johnson or get to a Higgins or get to McClaw get them on the ground?
mhm,
Oftentimes the answer was no. Where with Piketon, it's the yards after the catch. They use a lot of small bubble screens and so forth. And I thought Zane Trace did a good job tackling, but I thought they did a good job of almost coming up and challenging some of those, especially on
mm,
some of the early third down throws. They
mm,
basically came right at the sticks and basically dared Piketon to give them a double move. And as a result, got a pick six early, defended some things. And I thought those were very valuable. Now, I said this for Piketon. As the game went on, they did move the football.
mhm,
And I thought once they got stubborn and went to the run game, you can say that Zane Trace might have been giving a little bit more cushion because they knew they had the lead to play with in the clock or whatever. That's fine. But if you watch the line of scrimmage, they were starting to win from 20 to 20, but they
mhm,
would get into the red zone and they'd have a hard time finishing. I mean, here's the stat for you. If I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going off memory here. So if I mess this up a little bit, I apologize, but I know I'm close. I don't think Zane Trace ran the first offensive play in the second half until like a minute and a half to go in the third quarter because Python had the opening kickoff. They had a long drive where they moved the
mm,
football, couldn't finish, and then on the fourth down play had the pick six. Well, then they come down, they had the long drive again, turn it over on down. You know what I mean? So it
mm,
was one of those things where Piketon, I mean, I think I had Gaulian unofficially over 120 yards rushing. If
mhm,
you take, especially if you take away the sack yardage, I think I had him like 120. Tanner Lohr had the rushing TD. He had a nice night as
mhm,
well. Um, Piketon, maybe not as dynamic at wide receiver in terms of depth as what they've been in the past. But I mean, let's understand here. We talk about scheduling a lot on overtime. Piketon is in the midst of playing Valley, Zane Trace, and now Uniota.
mhm.
So let's just calm down a little bit on Piketon and continue to evaluate them. And let's see where a veteran coach like Coach Gaulian has this group by week 7 or 8. I still think, tell me if you disagree, I still think that a 7-3-ish, no worse than six
Mm,
and four type year as well on the table. Would you agree with
mhm.
that?
Oh, completely. And you mentioned them having the ball so long. Just on the max rep stats, they had a 2-to-1 play advantage over Zane Trace. And then also they were 2-to-1 in first downs over what Zane Trace did. So the big plays were on
Yeah,
Zane Trace's side, but Piketon was able to grind it away. Ultimately, we're not able to, turn it into many points. But yeah, and I think a 7-3. I'm gonna just look at it real quick. So like a 7-3, they're probably
well,
in.
obviously, Uniota is an uphill battle. I think the
Yeah,
Piketon Westfall matchup
week
is
9.
intriguing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think what happens sometimes is we overreact one way or the other. When I think we have to realize, well, wait a minute, Valley's 4-0, Zane Trace 3-1, Union's 4-0. Like there's some pretty
Mhm.
good football teams.
Yeah, those are some good teams that they've played, and just as you mentioned, it's a tough mix right now for them as they're going to have to go to Union on their homecoming night this week, so it's not easy. But then they've got 3 home games after that with Paint Valley, Southeastern, Adena, which they'll probably be the favorite in those games as well before they would take off to Westfall in week 9. So that's one to really keep an eye on as well because I think that team, they're a well coached team. You've got a senior quarterback. You got some tough kids. I think ultimately they're going to bounce back. It's just going to be a really tough stretch for them here.
I agree.
So last week, oh, actually, this week's Perfection One collision of the game, which is
Okay.
typically from our stream game, will go to Zane Trace's Hudson Williams. He had a big hit in the backfield. This could have went to a few different guys, but really we went with this big hit from Hudson Williams, which you're not going to see here on overtime, but you're going to see clipped by Derek here soon. It'll be put out, I believe, on Facebook, and with that, also probably our other socials as well. Remember that you can find Perfection One in Pickaway, Pike, and Ross County as they are highly recommended. So yeah, so several big hits. Brower had a big one as well. But man, Hudson Williams is the type of kid really fun to watch because he just flies around the ball and just obviously, you know, you do what he did in the spring, and he's an outstanding athlete. But one of the top linebackers in the area as well.
Zane Trace, and that's what's so impressive is you're going down 6, 7, 8 different names, no matter what units on the field, be it
Mhm.
special teams, offense, defense. They really pass the eye test athletically. They're going to match up with just about anybody they play throughout the SVC for sure. And then if they're fortunate enough to advance into that week 11.
Yeah, they've been one of those really talented teams for a long time. Williams ended up with 7 tackles. Blake Brower with 13
Yeah, I
on
believe it.
on the
We
day.
were calling that name all night. He was at one point. I was saying he's becoming a serious problem
Yeah,
that Coach Gallion would probably rather do without.
yeah, he had 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss in the game. Hudson Williams, the play that we picked was his tackle for loss in the game as well. So, just looking at their roster right now, I mean, you've got some really talented kids. Lucas Euler, Grady Stewart, who we mentioned a couple times, had a really nice game. Gunnar McCullough, Jaden Higgins, Peyton Arthurs, um, Connor Smith, Evan Miner. A lot of seniors, but also, man, they've got some really talented kids that'll be back.
Well, I mean, for
S
people that didn't see it,
Yeah,
we kind of touched on it there, but I don't know if we actually said it. McCullough threw the ball 2 times the
yeah,
whole night. He threw a 56-yard touchdown, a 70-yard
yeah.
touchdown, and it's all off of the run game. It's all off of the play fake. But that's what we're talking about. When you have athletes, like your Higgins and like your McCall and some of those kids, you obviously could spread it out and throw it a little bit too. But when you have that offensive line and you have the ability to run the football the way they do, that makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense.
But just being able to show that they can throw the ball is
Yeah.
gonna make them much more dangerous throughout the year as well. So, like, in that week 7 matchup, which we'll be at Uniota won't be able to sell out on the run as
Right.
much because you have to, respect the fact
Yeah.
that they can throw the ball
Well,
downfield.
with the run game, I think it forces you to play maybe a little bit more man to man than you would always want to play on a
Mhm,
Stewart or some of those types of kids, because you're wanting to cheat more down into the box because of the way they can run the
mhm.
football.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, outstanding team with St. Trace, very impressed,
Yeah,
and really that makes me even more impressed with what Amanda was able to do in week 3. So,
agree.
yeah, so the MSL is going to never have an easy week,
Yeah.
and we'll get into that here shortly. But last week we talked about a team of the week. Team of the week last week was Sims Valley, off to a 3-0 start. They moved to 4-0 because Bronx Carpenter threw for another 400 yards in a 45-24 win over South Point, who had not given up more than I think they'd given up like 20 total points so far. He's got guys like Jackson Fields, Levi Russell. They should be 6-0 going to Eastern Pike
See,
in
there you
week
go
7.
again. Coaches are going to be like, hey, we have a game this week.
Yeah, so, but Sims Valley has been outstanding, and I think that week 7 game,
I agree.
even though we're not gonna be streaming it, it will be streamed elsewhere, and I
Yeah.
would, after you watch our game in week 7, I would peek
Yes.
in over there and watch the replay, but,
Because we have a pretty good week 7 one
yes,
too.
which will more than likely be undefeated versus a one-loss team, so, should be fun on that. So, shout out to Sims Valley, staying undefeated. They've got Fairfield Christian this week, which Notre Dame took care of in week 1. Um, you know, so this week's team of the week, I think we can just mention some teams outstanding. So do you have any thoughts on anybody in that aspect?
Well, I think team of the week is always very subjective because we have a big coverage area, right? So like I think you want to be fair and you want to give the love to some of your undefeated teams out
Mhm,
there because winning's hard and they've won every game so far. So when you think of the obvious ones, your Irontons, your Wheelersburgs, your Uniotas, um, Lucasville's off to an outstanding
mhm,
4-0 start. I think we're starting to understand some of the teams that they have beaten are pretty good too. You mentioned Sims Valley. I think the Circleville team's really that's
mhm,
probably where my vote would go, would be Circleville at 4-0. But off of that, I'd piggyback. Remember in the preseason, I'd said that I was intrigued by Westfall. So even though
mhm,
they're a 3-1 team, they had an overtime loss to Circleville.
mhm,
So um, it's hard in a big area. I think it's just more of a subjective thing. For me, I'm extremely impressed by Circleville finding a way to win because you wouldn't have to squint very hard to get them to 2-2 or 1-3. Well, they're 4-0,
Yeah.
and there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, the Tigers have been very impressive, and like we said, they'd been 3-0 a couple of different times in the last 4 years, but a really impressive win over a Logan Elm program that's, going through a bit of a down year, but
And I'm impressed with how Logan Elm is getting better week. Well,
yeah,
that was a 5-point game at halftime the other
yeah,
night. If in watching them in the preseason, I thought they had a way uphill battle,
mhm.
and I don't know how many they're going to win. But man, Logan Elm is putting a competitive product out there.
Yeah, so they were very competitive with Westville, extraordinarily competitive with Miami Trace, who's also undefeated, in week 3, and then Circleville with an impressive win. So Athens,
Yeah, they were really good.
take a knee at the end, or you know, you know, point differential doesn't matter, but they've been very impressive with another big win. They're 4-0. I don't know if they're going to be challenged before week 10 with Nelsonville York, another undefeated. So I'm just saying
There's a
these.
lot of undefeated.
Yeah.
That's why I say, like, if you're going off record or whatever, you want to give people their due. A lot of times when you're breaking this down, I think it's more of a subjective thing
Mm,
for you to kind of look at. We want to spread some love, but at the same time, I look for a real honest what team jumps out at me as maybe if not a surprise or in Circleville's their ability to win close games. Because look, if you look at their schedule moving forward, they're going to have to play some incredible
mhm.
football to win half of them from here on out. But you said that maybe a month ago, and here they are 4-0.
Yeah. So that they're one of the many really talented teams in the area. One, Eastern Pike, really had their most impressive win when they beat Clinton County, Kentucky on Saturday. I don't know how good of a program it is, but it's a slightly bigger school. They've beaten South Point, who's been a little bit better than we expected. That Huntington team is going to be pretty good in Division Six.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're a playoff team, but they're going to be an SVC team that, especially after this week. This week they've got Zane Trace coming in. After this week, things get. I don't want to jinx it. Slightly easier, but for them, I think the chance of finishing over 500 is definitely there. And Menford is another one. Wyatt Swick was leading the country in receiving yards as a freshman, or he was 16th in the country as overall, number one freshman in the country. Through 3 weeks, he had 477 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. So he had a nice game as well in their win over Oak Hill this week. Man, I'll tell you what, that is a team that is going to be a nightmare to play against because they just went out and got some dudes in their school that were just had played, but
Yeah.
hadn't for the last couple of years. Maybe both started the state championship game in soccer this year, and then they're taking the year off. Um, but you got Peyton Cottle, um, Ty Borland. You got some really. I think Mark Napier went out and had a big play the other night as well. And it's just an outstanding team overall that really has caused a lot of issues for their opponents. And right now, I'm completely blanking on one player, but it's a team that they were way down last year. They seemingly have, off to a 2-2 start. They're at Northwest this week, so it's going to be tough for them. But just getting some wins
Northwest
is
has been a competitive football team
yes.
as well.
Curtis Glenn, man, I don't know how, because Curtis Glenn was a big part of that basketball program as
Yes, he
well.
was.
He's
Yeah.
played quarterback. He's been really good for them. A couple other teams I wanted to mention after Menford and Eastern Pike. So you got Uniota 4-0. Cody Braden's running wild. He's going to be on the verge of breaking their career touchdown record for rushing touchdowns if he keeps things up. Portsmouth Notre Dame had a coaching change in the offseason. They are now 4-0. They've been outstanding. Overall, I think they're a program that, maybe they were expecting to be good this year, but you have a late coaching change, like late July coaching change, and you're still off to a 4-0 start. They play Shadyside at home this week, which will be tough, but is a winnable game for them. But their opponents so far are 8-8, so they haven't played really bad opponents, but they've done a good job of taking care of business. And then the one for the first time ever the Greyhounds of Manchester are 4-0. So we talked about their schedule a little bit off the air. Not the toughest schedule, but we're building a program. You got to find wins
Well, and
somewhere.
it's incredible what we really researched there is we found that they've stayed with it.
Mhm.
You know, I can't imagine it's one thing to add golf to your athletic program, you know what I mean, where you
Mhm.
need 4 kids and you find a local golf course and you get a little financial support behind it or whatever. When you start talking about a football program, you're talking about an unbelievable financial commitment, funding, and all these different things that go into it, and then you're trying to build it from the ground up, and, it could take a decade just to get your first little league kids all the way up through your program just to get it established, so yeah, hats off to them. It just you have to have a vision, and it goes so far beyond the junior and senior class right now. It goes. You have to have some forward thinking, and this this will be a good thing for their community and their school if they're serious about really trying to establish this sport in their athletic
Mhm.
program.
Yeah, for Manchester, they made the playoffs for the first time last year. They go to Minster and lose that game, which most local teams are going to. I will say, shout out to 2001. It would have been 2020, Adena, because like they had Minster come in. I'm like, oh, you know, the SVC is not
Yeah,
usually very good. But they just pounded Minster. So shout out to that Adena team. But going back to Manchester, last year they won 3 games, made
yeah.
the playoffs. So I do think we'll talk about that later on the playoff adjustment for this year. Going back to 2017, they won 4. The most wins they've ever had in a season is 6 in 2013. A lot of zeros, a lot of ones in there. They've gotten off to 4 wins. They host Van Loo on Saturday this week, which should be a win. They've got Crestline coming up next week on the road, which is like, and the schools they're playing are not close at all. Like Van Loo and Crestline aren't close. They got Fedhawk, Van Loo again, and then Fisher Catholic in week 10, which I think when I was looking at it is the one game that I think um, is going to be really tough for them. But man, Notre Dame put it on Fisher Catholic, so um, there's an outside chance they can get to 7. I think 7 is pretty comfortable, but they can get to 8, maybe 9, and then you never know. So shout out to Manchester. But yeah, I think our team of the week is going to be the Circle Tigers. It's been very impressive. Coach Jay Sherritt's done an outstanding job. But man, there's been a lot of special teams in this area.
There really has been, and week to week that'll go, and obviously the undefeated groups will shrink. But again, it doesn't have to understand this isn't always a power ranking thing.
Mhm,
It's just more of a we follow a lot of teams and we're just watching certain teams and they'll catch our eye or a certain score will catch our eye and then we'll look into them a little bit more and
mhm,
start to follow them a little bit more. And the Circleville really caught my attention about 2 weeks ago there. And then I had a chance to really sit down and study them on film when I watched that Westfall
mhm,
overtime game, one of the best football games I've seen all year. And it just right now they are finding ways to win. And as a coach, I appreciate that.
mhm. Yeah, I completely agree. And then we talked about it last week. I think we got to talk about it again this week. Cartae Ligon. Man, like
Yeah,
at 420 yards last week,
yeah.
and he follows it up with 295 and 4 touchdowns after a 5 touchdown performance last week. And then the most important thing, 2-0. And I guarantee him and Coach Carper will say the same thing of like, hey, we just need to get wins. And he is doing everything he can to help that team get wins. Because, Andrew Hamman goes out with a leg injury. Hopefully, he'll be back before the end of the season for Chillicothe. Tay Harris has done a good job of stepping in for them.
Yes, yeah.
But if the running back can make things a little bit easier on the passing game, and you got Cartae Ligon, that's a good place to start.
Well, obviously, the first 2 weeks of that schedule that we understood
Well,
were
most
brutal.
most of the area is going to go 0-2. Maybe a couple of those teams that we talked about in the team of the week maybe don't, but yeah, most of the teams in the area will be.
So for those that don't understand what we're talking about Bloom Carroll, London, and on the road. And if you go back to last year, Chillicothe really struggled here throughout the rest of the non-league schedule. The Western Brown teams have been a program that's historically been able to throw the ball over the yard, and then
Mhm.
um, Portsmouth West is an outstanding program. This Wilmington team they're going to play, very, very athletic, really impressive group. So for them to be able to flip the switch from last year to this year, coming and playing these games at home and being able to get back to 2-2, that's a big step forward as Cartae comes into his sophomore season. But look, this is obviously a centerpiece you can build around. I talked, if you didn't get a chance to hear the segment early in last week's show, you can go back and listen. I made kind of a comparison to one of my favorite players growing up in terms of an Eddie George, about a taller running back, and I've had some different feedback on that, which I appreciate. It's been a fun discussion with 2 or 3 people, but yeah, he's a terrific young man, a terrific athlete, and um, we've been saying it now for a while. We just it's kind of a privilege to get a chance to follow it. You sit back and watch each week, and I know he'll give a shout out to his offensive line and the guys working real hard for him. But yeah, he's special.
Yeah, Cane Pride coming rolling in, spinning in. I don't know. I don't know. All I know is I got the hurricane shirts at my house for my 8 months as a teacher there. Hey, we went over 500 in JV baseball. That's all that matters. So they got Wilmington this week coming in at 3-1. Their only loss was a 15-9 loss to an undefeated Miami Trace. That FAC is starting to look really good because we didn't even talk about the win of the week, which would be Washington Courthouse coming in on Fantastic 50. We're a 42-point underdog with Granville, and they go out and win 31-16 over the Blue Aces, who coming in were one of the better teams ranking wise in Division Three, and they win by 2 touchdowns. So extremely impressive there. Hillsboro's been really good so far. McLean is a team that's been maybe, not the toughest schedule so far, but they're off to a 3-1 start. And, their sophomore quarterback's been outstanding. So, I mean, this is a team that if you don't take them serious is gonna, have a chance to run all over you.
Well, when you look at the FAC over the last couple of years, you've had your Jackson and Miami Trace at the top, and they're still both very, very good. The other teams, what's happening now, John, is they're growing up. That Hillsborough team that we called a couple weeks back, now all of a sudden reads a lot more junior and senior in some of those key positions, and you've recognized those names at the varsity level now for quite some time. Same way we just said with Chillicothe, you get Cartae Ligon in the sophomore year. The Osborne kid at Courthouse is a special all-purpose athlete. Um, you mentioned the quarterback at McLean. I was real impressed with him on film when I watched him. So yeah, a lot of these kids are now getting into that sophomore, junior, senior year where they can start to impact a Friday night a little bit more. And you're right, it's made for the entire conference. I think over that's a league that doesn't get started until the second half of the year because they only play the 5 games. But they're I think they're in for a little bit more of a competitive brand of football throughout the year.
Yeah, Hudson Lovett, the quarterback. I want to make sure we get
Yes.
the name out there because I know he had 5 touchdowns a couple weeks ago.
He's outstanding.
Had some big games so far, but Washington should win this week. Chillicothe definitely has a chance to win. Miami Trace should win. Jackson, which we'll get to that in a few minutes, is going to have a tough one. Hillsborough should win. And McLean's going to have a really tough one because they play that Williamsburg team that really took care of Hillsborough last week.
Yes.
But if Washington can get that win, which they should, as we said, every team will be over 500 going into league play.
Pfeiffer's the sophomore quarterback, and Aiden Osborne.
Yeah.
When you said we should get the
Yeah.
names out there, I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Aiden Osborne's a really unique, all-purpose athlete. If you haven't had a chance to see him play, I got a chance to call one of his games last year. He's really dynamic.
Yeah, so the FAC, you hear Cartae Ligon a lot, you hear Julian Baker, you hear Adam Guthrie, outstanding players. The Jackson group, like the entirety of the Jackson group.
Yeah.
But man, don't sleep on McLean, Hillsborough, Washington Courthouse. So I mean, you've got 6 teams that are all going to be over 500 going into league play. Just going to help the winners of those league games out a lot, especially with it being a 12-team playoff instead of a 16-team playoff. This might be the one year where their league's probably like, man, why can't we have 16 leagues?
Yeah.
Well, because you may have gotten each of them in the top 16 if a couple things go their way down the stretch. But ultimately, that Washington win over Granville is going to hang they're going to be able to hang their hats on that throughout the year. So, Fantastic 50 has their whole list of biggest upsets throughout the year. Week 1, you have a couple, but that's just kind of those based off of the year
Hard to
before.
predict.
Yeah, but when it gets to week 4, it had Washington at a 1% chance to win that game, and they were the
Right.
biggest underdog to win so far. Second biggest was a 39-point win, but that was a week 2 game. So, very impressive win for the Blue Lions. Coach Williamson did an outstanding job there before. He's back. Don't sleep on the Blue Lions at all. So, you got anything else on football?
I think that's about it. We'll
Oh,
move.
actually,
Good.
yeah, we have our games of the week. Yeah, because we got two really big ones. There's some big ones across the area, but two really big ones. We'll talk about our streaming game of the week next. But first, Jackson at Ironton. I think Ironton probably is going to be a fairly sizable favorite in
Yeah.
that. But man, this is an Ironton team that they go out, they challenge themselves each week. They won a state championship last year. You lose a stud in Sean Terry. You lose a player to Penn State. You're losing, or not losing. You're graduating outstanding players each year. But man, it just feels like they're reloading.
Well, that's what
Yeah,
those programs do. We've talked about it before. Oftentimes, you won't hear of the freshman or sophomore that's so dynamic because they're waiting their turn. You know what I
yeah.
mean? That's why they're playing high level JV matchups as well and so forth. And they may get a little hint of a Friday night here or there, but for the most part, you're playing behind the guy going to Missouri. You're going to wait your turn, and then you'll
Yeah.
get yours. You know what I mean? And that's what you have there. I love the fact that there's still some Southeast flavor on their schedule.
Hmm.
I thought the Jackson Wheelersburg game a couple weeks back was a great matchup. Now Ironton's going to face these two schools in the next 2 weeks and see as well. So I think it's a great test. Can one of them beat Ironton? I don't know that I would pick it that way, but I think it's a great test for them for before they get into their true league grind. This is a great test for them to see right now as we stand where can we be exposed come week 11.
Hmm.
I think that's what this type of game can do for a Jackson and then eventually a Wheelersburg. Um, and I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, it's a game that will be between two outstanding programs, two great coaches, and as we said, I'm pretty sure Ironton's going to be the favorite in it. But this is a Jackson team that is very prideful. But going down to Tanks Memorial is never an easy place to play at any level,
Yeah.
especially on a Friday night. So as you said, shout out to these teams. They've played for years, but for continuing that, and for Ironton to still keep, I believe it's 5 Southeast teams on their schedule, and you have 3 that were in the OVC with them, but Wheelersburg and Jackson staying on the schedule and battling them each week or each year, it just makes those programs as a whole better. And then what Ironton is able to do in their other, well, I mean, they're independent. So their overall schedule
Right.
is very impressive. And I just want to say, I mentioned this to you as well, but they only have the 25th strength of schedule in Division 5. Like, how crazy are some of those schedules when, Ironton's is ranked that low because, man, they now I know some of those teams coming in maybe have not had the seasons they were expecting, like with Liberty Christian Academy that had like a 27 game win streak coming in. Maybe they're not as quality as they expected, but maybe they are, and they just beat 42-3. So I mean, this is an Ironton team that is just putting it on people. Finally gave up 21 points this week to a guy going to Notre Dame. But they still win 55-21, so it's whatever. But they are
Yeah.
an outstanding team and program. Shout out to Coach Pendleton and his staff and all
No
the kids
question.
down at Ironton as well. So, but our stream of the week will be Battle of Undefeateds, Wheelersburg at Valley, likely for the SOC championship. Um, Wheelersburg 4-0, Valley 4-0. Should be a fun night in Lucasville.
Well, I've had a chance to watch Valley now twice on film, and Wheelersburg. I'm only about a quarter in on on my prep work for the upcoming week, and because I know Dewey and I are going to get a volleyball matchup here. We're looking at a couple different options for later in the week, but I think it's going to be one of those games where obviously Wheelersburg has been known as a team that set a standard there for a while in that conference, and they've been tough to beat. There's been some Portsmouth West, there's been some Memphis, there's been some Valley, it's really a deep
Mm,
league, Waverly and so forth all the way through. And as you come up on this matchup, I just think the ability to possess the ball. You were talking about, time of possession the other night. It didn't work out for Piketon because they couldn't put the ball in the end
mm,
zone, but they were at least on the right track. I think Valley's got to do some things with their ability to run the football. They have a couple guys that can do it. They're pretty good up front. They're going to have to possess the ball. Wheelersburg and some of the early prep work, man, just been so impressed. The same way I talked about Zane Trace on a whole different level. I've just been impressed with how solid they are in all areas. All
mm.
their units are really, really good. You can kind of hang your hat on any of those units on any particular Friday night. So as I dive deeper into it throughout the week, um, going to be an incredible atmosphere. I'm looking forward to it. I know Wheelersburg might come in favored in the eyes. I've tried to ask around, and I'm getting
Mm,
the impression from some people out there that Wheelersburg probably comes in as the favorite.
mhm.
But again, I've been very impressed with Valley to this point on film, and I'm anxious to see the matchup play out.
I'll tell you what, pregame, I'm excited just to watch the kickers in the pregame because
Yes.
you have Cooper Heimbach and Jalen Bender, two of the best
Yeah.
kickers in the Southeast, both with big time legs, very accurate kickers, big time. So more than likely, the return game probably isn't going to be a big factor in this one, barring
Yeah.
some wind. But you mentioned running the ball, just kind of grinding the clock. I think Valley is going to want to try to keep Wheelersburg on the field as much as they can. They've thrown the ball decently. Braxton Conway's done a good job for them at the quarterback position, but you also have Hunter Cunningham that can get some snaps as well. But when you think about Valley, you think of the big line,
Yeah.
but you also think of Anthony Aaron, Gabe McNeil, two outstanding running backs, maybe the best running back tandem in the Southeast. Um, just an outstanding group back there, and they've done a really good job defensively this season as well. So really impressed with what Valley's been able to do with Coach Crabtree so far through 4 weeks.
I've been impressed with their ability to run the football and be pretty mistake free while doing it. Now maybe
Mhm,
coach would disagree with me, but in the two games I've watched, they've been able to avoid a lot of the penalties. They haven't put the ball on the ground a bunch.
mhm,
So I've just been impressed with the efficiency of their run game, and I think a lot of that has to do with the two-headed monster that you referenced there. When you have the ability to kind of turn one guy loose, give another guy a breather, and you kind of keep coming with a fresh body. I think that's certainly been able to put some wear and tear on defenses, and that has shown up into the third quarter of just about every game I've watched them
mhm.
play this year.
Yeah, and then Wheelersburg is another team that they're going to keep you on the field. If you can't get off the field, they can hit a big play from time to time, but they're another team that's going to grind you. Stephen Hall, Elijah Brown in the backfield, but also Braylon Rucker, who is their quarterback, does a really good job behind center or under center, but also he can run the ball as well. And if he's got to, he can get the ball out. Brady Doss, Kenyon Evans, Xavier Miller, just they've got some outstanding Landon McGraw, Hunter Bivens, guys you see on the basketball floor. Um, got some outstanding athletes all over the field for Wheelersburg, even though they're not maybe that traditional big play. But man, they with that line, they can really grind you. So this could be a game that if you tune in at 8:45, most of it might be over, and it could be 7-3. Like it's a
Yeah.
game that you're not going to see a ton of passing between these teams as long as the defenses play at the level that we think they can to try to limit the big plays and make tackles. You can't lose guys uh, if you can bottle them up. You got to kind of swarm them, and I think both teams are going to be able to do that. I do think Wheelersburg's the favorite, but I think this could be a really fun matchup. Like I said, in Lucasville.
I agree with you. Everything you said. The last time I predicted a game like that, I called a game where a kid threw it 44 times and the teams combined for what, 83 points or whatever. So
I mean,
no, but in all seriousness, what impresses you about Wheelersburg is when you were rattling those names off, and I've seen some of those names on film now in my early prep, it really is what's the game call for? What's the
mhm,
situation call for? Some coaches really pride themselves on being balanced, but balance sometimes is just a fancy thing on the stat sheet that makes you look like you called a really balanced game. To me, balance means whatever the defense gives me, I can dominate them in that aspect. If you're going to drop the safeties deep and really not allow some of my stud wide receivers to get behind you, okay, well, we're going to hand the ball off and we're going to run it down your throat. If you're going to climb up in the box, we might still run the ball down your throat. But if it gets to the point where we can't, well, now we're going to start to. We think our athletes are better than your athletes on the outside, and Wheelersburg kind of showcases that in a
mhm.
lot of different areas.
Yeah, and I think they are, they're 4-0 for a reason.
Yes.
It's, they come in, they do use their athletes in an outstanding way. They've got some really good linemen. I know Emnett's one of those really, Ison Emnett's one of those really good linemen
Yep.
overall. You know, I've heard really good things about Blake Lundy for Lucasville Valley as well, defensively. So I just think this is going to be a really fun matchup. Um, I think it's one you really want to tune in for because I think it's going to be a fast pace, really old school type game with some outstanding athletes. So you might see some new school stuff out there as well, because these are two really well coached teams as well.
Excited to call it for sure.
Yeah, now we will move on, as when you put everything in and you just bold everything like I'm a child, you almost skip some things. But last week we talked about milestones.
Yeah.
What do you look at when you're taking into account the value of milestones, things like that? We talked about some soccer milestones. We talked about some volleyball milestones, which we'll still get to. But one big time soccer milestone on the coaching side. Chillicothe's girls coach, Zach Breth, gets his 100th career win for the Cavaliers. If you know anything about Chillicothe soccer, Coach Breth has done an outstanding job for a number of years. He's been kind of in and out of the program. Um, he turned it over to an assistant for a while, then he came back. Um, he's a really really good soccer coach, like a high level coach, and that's why Chillicothe girls soccer has been as good as it has
Yeah.
for as long as it has. I know they had some kind of low numbers this year, but overall he does a really good job of getting kids out. But sometimes, even at a school the size of Chillicothe, you can be hurt by a really talented, like 4-year class, which is what they graduated last year. Was a really good 4-year class where the kids sitting behind are like, I'll go
Yeah.
do something else.
When
Even
there's options out of school like that,
yes,
especially in the fall, maybe you have an elite cross country group come through. Right now, they have pretty good volleyball
mhm.
group come through. They have, I
They've
mean,
had good
they're
volley or good volleyball, good golf as well. So
yeah. So I mean, it doesn't take long for two kids go over here and two kids go here and two kids go here. Well, six kids would make a big difference on a soccer team. I mean,
yes,
in terms of athleticism. So to your point, I think the fall sports run into that a lot because there are so many options for the kids.
yeah, and like we talked about in the pregame was that, or pre-show, was that a little bit, was how it's great that there's all these sports, but it also does limit some things. So Coach Breath and Ada went over Washington last week, I believe on Thursday. So congratulations to him. As we said, it's a program that they're probably in a down year this year, but I wouldn't look for that to happen for very long because he does such an outstanding job. I believe it's Alex Urslan is still there. I believe she is the like the one senior, and she's an outstanding player. So for them, they're still a team that you probably don't like. You're gonna have a good chance to win against this year, but you're not super excited because they're going to be so prepared for each game. So congratulations to Coach Breath on that 100th career win.
Yeah, no
And
question.
yeah, and then um, And I was able to get out and watch some really good
I
games
had I
last
had a
yeah.
list of games here.
Yeah.
I'll throw at you, and then if you have more you want to give, I had down. I thought the Wheelersburg South Webster game was one that you threw. Talk to us about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, that was you know, people don't love ties. I don't love ties. But if you're in a conference that plays twice, okay, you can have the one tie because then the second game
Yeah,
is going to be so much bigger. And this was an outstanding contest. Really, South Webster just jumped right out of the gates. They were unbelievable early. Hit the post in the first 5 minutes. Braden Bird for Wheelersburg had to stand on his head to make an outstanding save in a one-on-one situation. Which, if you've seen Wheelersburg the last 4 years, you know Braden Bird's probably going to make a very, very good effort on a play like that. But less than 10 minutes into the game, Hunter Bernard gets a goal for South Webster. He was just pressing at the goal throughout. He was like you mentioned the 3, 4 sport athletes. Hunter Bernard is, I'm not going to say the best 3 sport athlete in the Southeast District, but if there's one better, man, it takes a lot because that kid, he was one of their best players on a Final Four team last year in basketball. He scored 45 goals in soccer. They get to the Elite Eight, and he's their three-hole hitter
outstanding
in
baseball player.
baseball.
Yeah,
Like I think he was in double figures in that state semifinal game in basketball. He's going to be their best player there. Benai Andrews, an outstanding baseball player as well. But man, those two are outstanding. Andrews also plays on the soccer team. But I think Hunter Bernard is one of those players that was really underappreciated in our area, and I don't know why.
well, the
Yeah,
theme to everything you're saying is winning. You know what I mean? And that's what you appreciate the most is all of the stats and all these different things are fun for sports junkies like us to dive into. But at the end of the day, the coach in me, as you were rattling off those different things, I was thinking, well, they win there. Well, they win there.
Mhm.
Well, they win there too. You know what I mean? And it's that's what you appreciate the most is it's all centered around the team success.
Yeah, he's a winner. And typically with South Webster, they're winners, and
Yeah.
you see that. Maybe you saw Eli Roberts last year, and you're like, "Oh man, it's got to be easy to be his teammate." Well, you still got to score the ball if you're the other guys,
Right. Right.
because he's getting a lot of attention, but you still got to do it. And Bernard's been one of those players that's been able to do it. But man, like I said, 45 goals last year. He gets one early, and then something I had only seen happen once ever happened right after. So, be full disclosure, I'm texting out my update on, like, the score, I'm looking up at the scoreboard, and then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see the ball flying, and, the Webster goalie starts retreating, and then you hear clang off the goalie and in. It was 5 seconds after. Um, Nick Sylvia for Wheelersburg saw the goalie playing up, gets the ball touched to him, kicks it from the midline, off the crossbar, off the
Wow.
goalie, into the goal to tie it at 1 within 6 seconds from South Webster taking the lead and just being ecstatic.
Yeah.
They're setting up to play defense, and then boom, it's tied. And that was the game. 1-1. It's just
That's phenomenal.
but man, there were some I and maybe I don't wanna say it because, you know, Sylvia is one of the top now 10 goal scorers in OHSA history. But like just because like Miles Montgomery was outstanding. He's one of the top goal scorers in OHSA history. He still got a lot of the attention that Bernard maybe hasn't been getting the last couple of years. That's along with Sylvia being there. So man, that league is unreal with soccer talent. Um, Sylvia and Bernard showed what they were able to do throughout that game. But they each get a goal. Like I mentioned, Braden Bird was really good for Wheelersburg. Sam Murphy made a couple of really tough saves in the second half, including one late. Evan Mitchell took a rocket from about 25 yards out, and Murphy was able to punch it over the goal and ultimately maintain the save. Late in the match, I want to make sure I get the name correct on this. Late in match, there was a play where it looked like there may have been um, a little bit of contact. Ultimately, I was able to, I've got a film on it. Looked like the contact was minimal, but it was Case and Witt for Wheelersburg. Comes from the middle, left middle back. Just goes over, makes a great individual tackle on a play. I know the Wheelers or the South Webster people wanted the foul in the box. Ultimately, I think it was the right call, like a no call on it. But Witt was outstanding. Andrew Tabor always is for them defensively, but the one that really stands out to me is Clark Weller defensively for Wheelersburg, a guy that I've watched for years, and I wasn't even 100% sure he was back, but man, he's been really good. They're a well coached team. They're going to be a lot of trouble for a lot of different teams, but just kind of looking at South Webster, and they did. South Webster was able to keep it tied. Their defense was really good throughout as well. It's a team that Braden Bernard, shocker. I'm guessing he's going to be a big time winner as well, like his brother. Um, but they were really good. Bo Stevens is out for them, but they've been really good without him. But if they're able to get him back, I'm not sure if he'll be back this year or not. But Cole Bennett was really good. Caden Johnson, just outstanding defensive effort by South Webster. Um, but man, this is they did a lot of it in the game without Bryson McClintock, who's another name you're going to hear across three sports for them.
Yep.
He left with some cramping issues. He ultimately finished the game, but I think if he's healthy, that's going to create an even funner, more fun atmosphere down at Wheelersburg Ed Miller Stadium, October 7th.
October 7th.
Yeah, we're going to be down there in some aspect. We're hoping to be able to bring it to you, but if not, we'll have plenty of coverage on that game. But Wheelersburg, South Webster, two outstanding teams. You're definitely going to want to keep an eye on for the rest of the season. And then because they're so well coached, Coach Estep, Coach Claxton do a great job with their programs. Keep an eye on them for the long haul.
No, no question.
Yeah.
As you rattled off those athletes and knowing all the different sports, that's unbelievable that they just do the winning they do across the board. Let's shift gears here. The other one I had down was a little bit of shack coverage.
Shaction.
You had the North Adams and Eastern Brown. I believe you had the boys girls double header.
Yes.
And they split that affair. Take us through that a little bit.
So Eastern Brown boys came in undefeated. We talked about it a little bit the other day or last week on Overtime presented by Perfection One. But they came in undefeated. North Adams had one loss, and it was a big time crowd. I don't know if Raymond got pictures of the crowd, but he had great pictures for. Sorry for hitting that throughout the night. So check out our I think it's our Smug Mug page, which will have Raymond's pictures because once again that dude does an outstanding job there.
Yeah.
But North Adams came out a lot of energy. It seemed like Eastern was a little bit on their heels, and then North Adams gets a corner kick early, and where Eastern was playing so hard and very aggressive. Um, on the corner kick, had two players go for the ball, deflects off one of them, and into the goal for an own goal early. I believe it was a 31-minute mark. An own goal, so they get down 1-0, and it felt like it woke them up. Like they had to just really refocus. Um, there was a play in the game that was just one of those complete game changing plays. So there's a ball bouncing around the penalty spot. Multiple players go for it. Thad Moore, one of the players who goes up, skies to uh, try to collect it. Eastern gets a head on it, and the ball gets loose, and it looks like it's going into the back of the net. But ultimately, now I'm going to make sure I get the name right because I definitely said it wrong to their coach the other day. I think I said his brother's name, or maybe it was a person with a similar name, but it was Dalton Pence. Goes back, gets a head on the ball, flicks it off the bottom of the crossbar, and then it kind of goes away. And then another shot comes in. Pence is able to deflect that, so he gets two non-goalie saves within about 5 seconds. When I was a senior, I had two non-goalie saves in like 21 matches. Like it doesn't happen very often. He gets it, boom, boom, saves it back to back, and then they changed direction. It wasn't immediate, but you can feel that the momentum went right back to North
Oh, yeah.
Adams, where Eastern started to feel like they're getting it. So one lucky bounce goes North Adams' way off the player's back, and then a still a fortuitous bounce of getting off the bottom of the crossbar, but really a smart bounce. So they get a couple of slight breaks. One was a lot more self-made break by Pence doing that outstanding play, but ultimately they get a ball on a run out. Dylan Molinex with a nice cross into Tristan Young, makes a man miss, finishes the shot in the corner to go up 2-0. And then late in the game, it got very physical. And I might have said something to the crowd because it was like, oh, it's about time. There's a whistle on them. I'm like, the fouls are 9-9 at that point. So the fouls are even. But it felt like because it was just so physical between the two teams, really fighting. It felt like if Eastern got a goal, yeah, they'd be right back in it, but ultimately, a unlucky bounce for Eastern comes up, hits a hand in the box, ends up being a penalty kick. Tristan Young slots it in for a second goal and a 3-0 win for North Adams. But if these two teams would match up in the tournament, I would love to be there because I think they're pretty even teams. Ultimately, North Adams took advantage of every opportunity that they had and did a great job to get that 3-0 win. But on the girls' side, it was a very different game because the um, you know, North Adams came in without a league win. Eastern came in with one league win, but you couldn't tell that in the first half because I thought both teams played really hard and did a really good job of competing in that match because the first half 0-0 going into the
I'd
half.
say that matchup brings that out of them. It's a pretty
Yeah,
big rivalry, and you know, I mean, in a situation where you're not, you're playing football in the fall and so
yeah,
forth, you know, on the boys' side, and then I know there's volleyball matchup too. But I would say that these are pretty. I'd say they're highlighted games on the schedule, regardless of
mhm.
what the records are. Is that fair?
Yeah. I would say so because you're not real far away. You're two really proud programs.
Yeah,
They've
yeah,
um, both have made deep tournament runs in the past 5 years.
yeah.
They've been really good at different times. Lynchburg is the
Right,
high point
right. Yeah,
program of that league, but these are some really good programs as
sure.
well. So I liked what I saw out of North Adams. For a team that hasn't won in the league, I thought Bella Gray did a really good job in goal for them. She ended up going out with an injury with about 10 minutes left. I talked to the trainer and she said she thought she'd be okay. So that was a good thing. But Kinsley Cornett, Jada Harrison were kind of all over the field for them. Ultimately, Harrison got a goal late, but it ended up being a 4-1 win for Eastern Brown. Autumn Farron with 2 goals. McKenna Corbin with a goal, 2 assists. Alyssa Fisher got a goal late. And, I thought that for two teams that have had, and that's why I think a lot of the Shack and the girls league, because if those two teams are having trouble winning, and that's not even mentioned with Fairfield, Fayetteville are both really good programs as well. It's a league that is really deep with talent. So if a team like North Adams is having trouble winning, that just to me shows that there's a lot of depth in that league. But ultimately, Eastern Brown able to get a 4-1 win in the girls' side to go to 4-4 on the year. So a good win for them. North Adams drops at that point 3-6 overall, but this is a North Adams program I wouldn't think would be down for real long, and that Eastern Brown program, Farron only a sophomore, I think Corbin a junior as well, so um, should be teams to keep an eye on throughout the season.
No question. Good stuff there. That's all I had on my list. Anything we're shutting out on soccer there before we move on to volleyball?
Just a couple things. Monday, since we're doing this on, you know, we are doing this show on Sunday this week. Monday, you got Fairfield Union at Athens. Boys soccer should be a really good one. I'm going to see if that could be boys and girls. Um, yeah, this is high quality. It looks like that is just boys.
Well, I know you've talked about 2 different facilities with or without lights,
Yeah.
sometimes playing the doubleheader. I know they have to start early. That
Mhm.
that that's kind of a unique factor. It kinda takes you to the spring sports,
Mhm.
baseball type of darkness type of things and so
Yeah,
forth.
that'll be a different, definitely interesting thing late in the shack because a lot of them do not
Sure.
have lights on. But Tuesday, a non-conference game, which is North Adams at Uniola in boys. That one should be outstanding. I know Derek said he's going to be there for that. Brock's going to be at the other one on Monday. Then Brock also says he'll be down at Eastern Brown at Fayetteville. Um, now 9-1. Well, 9-0-1 Fayetteville, still undefeated in the league against 10-1 Eastern Brown.
Wow. Yeah.
And that is a must win for Eastern Brown to stay in the league race
And you
because
say follow Brock for that one?
yes, follow Brock for that one. And then Thursday you got Gaia at Jackson for boys soccer as well. So there's many more really good matchups
Yeah.
across the area, but those are some of the ones that stand out to me. So should be a really fun week of soccer as always. But now moving on, volleyball. So we were able to get there on uh, I don't even know Tuesday. My
Uh,
Miami Trace at Chillicothe, I believe, was
yeah.
Tuesday. Yeah, so
Well,
Miami Trace at
yes.
Chillicothe on Tuesday. Um, a couple of three setters in JV, and then you had a four setter in volleyball. You'll talk about that in a minute, but sticking with the milestones, you got one from Chillicothe, correct?
Yeah, Evelyn Hamlin, just a junior, just a terrific player, outstanding player. Really, really kind of appreciate the way she plays, the way she conducts herself in the community, the way she treats her teammates. It's just one of those real well-rounded student athletes as I talk to different people throughout the Chillicothe School District and throughout the community. And those are always good things to hear. You know, what I mean, as an
Mhm.
educator myself, as a coach myself, that's something that you always appreciate. But she went and set what was it when she went over 800 there?
Mhm.
She ended up breaking the all time kills record there at Chillicothe. Again, just a junior,
Yeah.
going to be knocking on the door of 1,000 here real soon, and then climb into some pretty elite company. I think the one thing that jumps out at me, John, is that she's done this with 3 or 4 different setters.
Mhm.
So like for people who don't know in volleyball, that setter hitter chemistry is really, really important. It's kind of like the quarterback who's with a different offensive coordinator or a pitcher catcher combination, quarterback wide receiver combination, whatever the
Mhm.
analogy you want to use throughout your favorite sport. It really matters. I mean, her freshman year, she had Avery Cox in the 5-1 attack. Last year, Grace Townsend in the 5-1, and then this year, depending on what rotation they're in, Natalie Dudley sets from the back row, and then Isabella Whitty does some setting from the front row. So again, really good setters that
Mhm.
she's had. But again, to be halfway through your junior year and to be 3 or 4 setters and different things, where you see a lot of programs where you might have that same duo, so
Mhm.
to speak, that's in the same grade or whatever. But no, I've really appreciated this Chillicothe team. We'll talk a little bit more about the match too as we get into Miami Trace, but the Chillicothe team, I think 6-6 now. You wouldn't have to squint very hard to get them to 9-3,
Mhm.
but they're just not. You know what I mean? And so they've lost some really close ones. They've lost some 5-set heartbreakers. The other night they lose in 4. Thought they had every opportunity. They were a little bit deer in the headlight in the first set. They come back in the second set and just really, really tough that they couldn't finish the deal. I believe it was 24-20 at the one point,
Mhm.
and Miami Trace comes back. And Chillicothe, I mentioned this on the air. Chillicothe's had some trouble finishing off sets. Now they haven't let all of them get away, but they just for whatever reason they've had some trouble finishing off some sets, and they fight back. They had a great opportunity. There was a really tough call that went. Looking back at the video, I think it was the right call, but I think it was a tough call because they thought they were going to score. The ball was ruled to have rolled down the tape and out of bounds without a touch. And if you're familiar with that rally scoring, man, those are the 2 shot swings on the golf
Mhm.
course, right? It's if you think all of a sudden you've cut it to 23-22 instead it's 24-21 or that type of thing.
Mhm.
Those types of calls are really, really important. So I'm anxious to see this Chillicothe team grow. I know their record probably isn't what they want it to be. I still think they have some winning in front of them. They're still not
Mhm.
out of this league race. They're going to get another chance. But yeah, Miami Trace team's impressive.
Yeah, that's on the 25th at Miami Trace. This says 6:15. That ain't happening because they're going to play the two JV ones before. So, but when we talked about milestones and we talked about how, you know, Katie Burns did it, broke the Adena record without hitting 1,000. This is a really good Chillicothe program too, and for the record to be 800, I think just stands out to like the bigger school how hard it is to get on the floor or out on the field at an early age. How much does that factor into some of
Well,
these
when you go
records?
back to the OCC days too, let's remember who they're playing
Yeah.
against. So for the longest time in Chillicothe, remember what I talked about? You have to almost do the pre and post rally
Mhm.
scoring. Well, Chillicothe's changed a lot in its dynamic over the last 20
Mhm.
years. So, and again, that doesn't take anything away from what this young lady's doing. I'm just trying to put some context on the
Mhm.
history of the Chillicothe athletic program. So a lot of that certainly goes into it for sure. But I think what's impressive is how much time she still has left. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like you're still talking
10 more regular.
halfway
Yeah.
through your junior year. So at the pace she's going, and again, going to finally have some consistency, et cetera. If you look at the grades of her teammates and so forth, and um, uh, I just think she's got some incredible volleyball ahead. And again, Chillicothe is going to be a dangerous team as we go. But look, let's also give love on the other side of this match to the winner, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Miami Trace. Dewey gave the incredible stat how the FAC streak is growing into the
Mhm.
30s. And what's so crazy about that is I feel like if you don't get them this year, you might not get them next year
Mhm.
because there's a lot of juniors and sophomores
Yeah.
on that roster. And when you look down through, um, Lauren Guess is just outstanding.
She
Lauren
was unbelievable that
she
night.
she was terrific, and they play her opposite of Lauren Farrens, and then the setter Kylie Yeasel is the way we were saying it. We weren't
Mhm.
corrected on it, so I hope I have that right. But she's really really good. She
Mhm.
does a nice job of setting, and Kiana Ackley at the libero position anchors their passing, and they have role players that are pretty efficient when they get their opportunity. But look, Miami Trace doesn't try to make it real fancy where the ball's going. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like they bring guests across the front row, then they bring fans across the front row, and um, yeah, they delivered when they had to. But yeah, if you look at the body of work on that whole night there, Lauren Guest, that's probably as good an individual performance um, as we've had throughout the year, and we've had some really good ones. But I thought she at times just individually took the thing over.
Yeah, she had 31 kills. Ferentz had 17. And they did a lot without Brianna Robinette, who left with an injury.
Yes.
But she came back and did play on Thursday, so that's a good
Yeah.
thing for them. But yeah, I thought their service was smartly aggressive.
Better.
Like, yeah,
It was better than
yeah,
it had been coming in for sure.
yeah. I didn't like. Sometimes you'll see teams that are just absurdly aggressive. But I mean, they were still 88% on just getting it over. So I mean, you're taking a lot of chances, but you're picking up the eight aces and a lot of those. You have 11 errors, but with eight aces, you're also getting them, off schedule a lot
Yeah.
with being aggressive. So I think that can be a big advantage for them.
I
Yeah.
thought they, from studying them coming in, I thought they did a good job of being the team that had been there, done that. Like what
Hmm.
I mean by that is if you go back to the first 10 points of that match, that was huge
Hmm.
because they kind of dominated the start of it. And then if you go from that point, John, all the way through probably early fourth set, you almost felt like Chillicothe kind of, I don't want to say outplayed them, but certainly played with them.
Hmm.
Yet Chillicothe's staring this steep hill up. You know what I mean? And Chillicothe easily could have been able to get that to a fifth set. Then you don't know what happens. But I thought because Miami Trace was able to come out and set the tone early, that had Chillicothe kind of chasing its rhythm, chasing its confidence throughout the evening.
Hmm. And then I know you were able to get out on Saturday. We did not have the stream for it, but you're able to get out and watch, a three-way match. One of the teams that really impressed you, I know you had mentioned before, Alexander.
Yeah, Alexander is always a school district I've been pretty familiar with because I have family down there, and actually the head coach, Lauren Hill's my cousin. So like, it's a program that Dewey and I had looked into maybe calling all those matches because Huntington, Notre Dame, Alexander.
Mhm.
That's pretty. Those are some
Yeah.
names that you hear a lot in the district, almost regional semifinal levels over the years. And go and yeah, the Alexander group now. Gosh, I don't have that schedule in front of me. I want to say over the last 8 days, it won like 6 matches because if you go back to what they did last weekend and then they throughout the week and they had the huge win over Athens to put them into a sole possession of first place. Remember, Alexander earlier in the year ended Nelsonville's long winning streak in the
Mhm.
TBC. And Alexander was a 15-9 overall, 10-2 in the TBC a year ago, finishing just off the pace and lost to that really good Fairfield Union team. They were D4 last
Mhm.
year. Now I believe Alexander moves back into D5, so they're going to be in there with the likes of Adena, Wheelersburg, New Lex.
It gets
I mean,
so much easier
that
for
is
them.
man, that is
You're like, "Oh, you get out of D4," but
that
then
is that
they
is again the
they
D4 and the D5 is really really good, but the huge advantage there, John, in all seriousness, is D4 only gets like the one spot,
right.
where D5 because we have so many
I believe
teams,
it's
they
3.
get like the 3 spots to the
Mhm.
regional. So um, that'll be something to follow. Obviously, you have some SVC teams that'll be dangerous in there as well. But for people who don't know, Lauren Hill, a lot of our volleyball listeners will remember her as Lauren Rains. Okay,
Mhm.
the Rains family, gosh, been part of Alexander for forever.
Mhm.
And, Lauren's older sister, Megan, was an Ohio player, and then they overlapped their career by a year. And then Lauren is a player. So this is what kind of the tradition that brings back to Alexander. Lauren's sophomore year, they lose in the Final Four. Her junior year, they lose in the state championship. And then her
Mhm.
senior year, they're the 2008 state
Mhm.
champions. So she was both an All Ohio setter and an All Ohio libero. So she kind of has that position
Mhm.
perspective. Lauren went on to play a couple years at OU. And then Lauren's younger sister, Carson Rains, was a really good player who also went on to play at OU some. So again, they bring a lot of volleyball experience and some different things. And I think what's interesting is when you watch them on Saturday, they're not going to ooh and ah you with a lot of highlights, but they're
Mhm.
just really rock solid in so many areas. They go at you, come at you with a 5-1 attack with Laney Douglas, their junior setter. And about 8 kids at play. I believe they have 6 seniors, 2 juniors, so they're older, and you can see a little bit of maturity in their game. You can see a little bit of the way they treat one another. You can tell they like one another. They have an outstanding, player, and I'll make sure I try to say the name right. I believe it's Mina Yedis. When you look at it,
Mhm.
you won't say it that way, but I think I'm really close. So Mina, if I butchered that, I
Yeah.
apologize. But listen, she is really really good. I mean, she's a lanky athlete. That She can dominate the net. Pretty good server. When she has some risk reward, she fights some efficiency things. But when she's on, she's on. Defends the back row a little bit. Really really good all around player that Coach Hill can build around. And you have some complementary hitters from Moser and Penrod and even Hubbard. The other junior on the roster is the libero, Abby Ohms, and she does a terrific job. And they're pretty good. I mean, if I had to pick out a weakness, and this is unfair watching them play one Saturday morning in person, I would probably say it's probably in the consistency of their service game and their serve receive.
Mhm.
Um, they have the ability to pick some spots and hit them pretty well. They did go through a stretch of some errors the other day, but when listen with Yidis leading the way and those other 2 secondary hitters with pretty solid setter play, when they pass the ball on target, there'll be a factor. So I don't know if we'll get them on the schedule this year. I know they've got their Athens rematch
Mhm.
later in the year. I know they have Nelsonville coming back to them. I know we're trying to balance maybe I know you mentioned maybe flirting with
Mhm.
some different types of soccer
Yeah.
coverage. So again, we may not get them till tournament time, but that's a team that is certainly one to put on your radar a little bit.
And then, you know, sound obviously, uh, sounds like Alexander's having a really nice sports fall, between the soccer programs and, volleyball. But speaking of some really good fall seasons, Adena and the state rankings. So, what can you tell us about the state rankings? And is this a sport where you really look at them tight because is it AP or is it coaches?
Well, on the coach's side, yeah, I don't, I think I want to say volleyball is more like on the baseball side with the coaches and stuff,
Which
but
to me is both better, but also like if they don't take it serious, it couldn't be
no, I
good.
think that's true in any voting. I look at it, but I'll be honest, I think for the most part, the rankings that I've seen early in the year are pretty fair. I mean,
Mhm.
when I look down through here, obviously Adena 13-0 and 6-0, they have a week coming up here where at Southeastern, at Uniota. We're not sure exactly what we're doing on the coverage. We're
Mhm.
eyeballing that Thursday night game there with Uniota, but that hasn't been set just yet. But obviously, Burns is averaging 6.6 kills per set. That's just crazy this late in the year. Continues to dominate. But here's a stat for you, John. Adena is serving right around 95%. They have 96 aces to 46 errors. Are you kidding me? I mean, so they're coming at you and they're serving tough. So even when it's not an ace, if they force you into a little bit of a out of system type of free ball, well, now especially in those rotations where Burns is coming at you, and don't look now, but Jones is starting to come on
Mhm.
opposite of her and hitting a little bit. Kimmy Dalton has 34 of those aces, and I know sometimes she fights her efficiency, but she's unbelievable in the back row. Obviously, her and J.C. Smith averaging 5.5 digs. And they serve receive it at about 90%. So again, they have four servers serving it over almost 97%. I mean, so you start doing
So
that with that ace to error ratio. And I mean, again, you're trying to pick out weaknesses on these teams,
mhm.
not to be critical, but just to see, hey, where can they improve or whatever. But the Adena efficiency is off the chart. So when you go to the state rankings, let's just give some love to some
Well,
programs here. Go ahead.
I just wanna go back to that Adena.
Yeah.
So, what you're saying, they're a team that you have a hard time scoring on, and then they just don't really make mistakes.
They don't
So
mess up. And in
so
rally
it's
scoring, that's so important. So they're not
yeah.
going to mess up on their serving or serve receive very
Mhm.
often to start the
Yeah.
point. Then they're going to come at you in three rotations with arguably the best hitter in all of Division Five.
Yeah.
And then I certainly can't imagine in our coverage area there being a better 1-2 punch defensively than
Mhm.
Dalton
Yeah.
and Smith back there. So yeah, they're just it's hard to score against them, and then they're going to come at you with some offense. So as Jones continues to grow in that hitting room opposite of Burns, that's where they're going to take the step. Because remember last year it was Day,
Yes.
and they did get hit by graduation there, but yeah,
But I thought that was
they're impressive.
that's what made them so good last year was the 1-2. So if Jones continues, man, that's just gonna
I
be
don't have that in front of me. I want to say Jones is up to about 2.5, 2.2, two
mhm.
and a half kills per set, and that's going to work just fine.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
So when you go to the D5, Adena number one, Wheelersburg three, Zane Trace 14, Alexander 17. Now with Alexander's week of 6-0, I think it was,
Mm.
look for Alexander to probably jump Zane Trace a little bit. I could see Alexander pushing toward the top 10. And I think that'd be more than deserving. Bloom Carroll, number one in D3. Uniota comes in at 11, just outside the top 10, where, again, Uniota's only losses to the outstanding Adena team, number one in the
Mm.
state. And then Logan Elm. Logan Elm comes in number two in Division Four, followed by Warren, last year Final Four team at
Mm.
three. Gallia Academy, who I know we love and we're
Yeah.
high on, they're seven. And I think because they're a little bit of the new kid of the block, what you find is sometimes early in the year, the new team is kind of slow to come up the
Yeah.
chart. That number seven ranking could keep getting better
Mhm.
in a hurry. And then you even have the depth of Waverly and Circleville all the way down there at 14.
Mm.
So those are two dangerous teams too. That Division Four Southeast, when you only get one,
Mhm.
that's insane. And then let's see here, D6, South Webster at 16. South Webster's played an incredible schedule.
Mhm.
So again, they have a lot of losses to some really good teams. And then D7, Racing Southern in at 9 at 10-1, but Reedsville Eastern comes in 15th, but actually they're in first place. And I look for that to flip a little bit in the upcoming vote
Mm.
because Eastern beat them this past week in
Jeez.
four. They will have an October the 9th rematch at down in Racine. And I believe that's the last match of the season. So there's another one that we always try to make note. Again, can't promise where we'll get, but we'll always try to, if we can actually get it on the stream, to make sure we talk about
Mm.
it on here.
Yeah.
But that's what's so neat about these things is week in, week out, you're getting these matchups everywhere in terms of some high quality volleyball.
Yeah, and it's just outstanding across the board. As you mentioned, all the different divisions with representation across the state. I just pulled up the Max Preps rankings on Division 5, and in our Southeast District, even though we don't cover New Lexington, because
They're in that, they'll be
yeah,
in that district.
yeah. On Max Preps, they're 4, Wheelersburg's 2, and Adena's 1, and then you got Alexander down at way down at 11, and then St. Joe's
Well,
14.
so
So
that does
yeah,
show me a little bit because I wondered if Alexander, with their week they had that I
yeah.
just highlighted, would have a shot at the top 10, and that tells me that they probably do.
Yeah, 'cause I think, some people will look at max preps and like, whatever, like, but, like, if you're gonna look at max preps in any sport, it's volleyball because
And again, you
yeah,
don't have to live and die on. That's why I tell
yeah,
people, calm down a little bit. If you aren't ranked where you want to be in max
mhm,
preps, go win the game. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, but it's just a resource that gives you something to look at. And when you're rattling off those numbers, even if you don't agree exactly with them, they're pretty close.
mhm, yeah, and it's typically by the end of the year, those things, even out, which is why, like, if you look at girls basketball last year, Portsmouth was pretty much number 1 throughout, and
Yeah.
then they were 1 at the end. So,
Well, if you
yeah,
remember last year's bracket too, it was Adena and New Lex that had to collide.
yeah,
And a lot of the SVC had to beat up on each other in the other bracket. Wheelersburg probably, I think that's fair, had the
yeah,
easiest run to the Sweet
yeah,
16. And then once it got to the Sweet 16, it got nutty. You know what I mean?
mhm,
So um, don't forget SVC volleyball over the years has a way of just proving to be pretty good.
yeah,
So some of those district quarterfinal, trying to get used to that,
yeah,
sectional championships, or those district semifinals. Some of those matchups, if you have some of those SVC teams in your bracket, man, those are dangerous opponents.
mm,
That Zane Trace team's dangerous, Southeastern's dangerous. I still think this Huntington group's going to get a little bit better. They've got about 4 sophomores and a freshman that I'm high on that I
mhm,
think have
yeah.
potential. They're just not there yet. They're going to be pretty dangerous come the end of the year.
Oh, yeah, and they're a team that, in the future as well is gonna be one to really
Sure.
keep an eye on. So, that kinda puts a cap on volleyball, and then last week, we did a big segment on golf, which led to Shayne getting out and watching some golf in person. So, I know you got out there, I believe the Big Beaver?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
up at Crown Hill earlier in the year. I was down at Big Beaver this week, and Westfall pulls away there in the SVC. Piketon on their home course played well,
Mhm.
lost by 7. I think it was 158, 165 ish somewhere in there. So, not Westfall's very best, but plenty good enough. Hunter Skaggs and Jace Ritchie both shot 40 for Piketon to try to keep pace with Westfall, but Westfall's just so deep. Westfall's dropping 44s and
Mm.
45s, you know what I mean? Like week in, week out, those are scores that other teams would love to
Yeah.
have. It would mean some of these teams moving from 6th place to 3rd place if they could get them. They don't have that depth. Brendan Beegler, is that how
Believe it is.
he and teammate in Camden, 38s. So, one thing that is going to catch up with Westfall, the Uniota teams for the longest time had this.
Mm.
Westfall is going to have a decision to make when you get to the tournament and only play the 5.
Right.
Because again, their depth has been so incredible throughout the year. That is going to be a decision they'll have to make. And then every round, every shot becomes that much more important. If you look right now, on the OHSAA app and you look through some of the different things, Westfall's ranking in that top 10 right now in their division. And when you break it down on about 4 players that count, when I talk about being 4 or 5 shots off the top 2 or 7 or 8 shots off the lead, what that means, and if you play golf, you know exactly what I mean. What that means is every single 4-foot putt, every single decision when you get in trouble, every shot means so
Mhm.
much from all 4 players that'll count, really all 5 players that'll be on the course. Some other names, Callaway Rattler from Uniota shot 38 that night. Tucker Taylor from Huntington and Aiden Cooper from Paint Valley. Looks like those kids are going to be locks for all league,
Mhm.
assuming they stay healthy and finish their rounds, which you have to do. But no, that was something that jumps out. They're going to go and they're going to play the Elks in Portsmouth in an 18 hole, which will give them a little tournament
Mhm.
experience. There's a ton of teams coming. Zane Trace Invite over the years has always taken the
Mhm.
last one of the last days of the year. And a lot of people love to come to that because it almost serves as an 18-hole practice round for the
Mm,
sectional, which so many of them are at
yeah.
Jaycees. So a lot of people will come to that. So it'd just be interesting. I think on the boys' side there, when you go now, what happens is so many of these teams break into their own division. I know down in the SOC, I heard the announcement the other night. Portsmouth West was out in front. I believe they do. Maybe someone can help me with that on our coverage. I believe they do the year-long stroke play,
Mm.
where the SVC does the more match by match. So yeah, that's what we have on the boys' side.
Yeah, and just looking at Um, the Shack Golf, I think they may have done like a 2-day tournament. I know Nolan Wilkin won that or led that out on the second day. Chris Hall shot well for them. Wilkin shot a 36. Tegan Knox, Parker Hayslip, who I mentioned last week, with a 38 as well. So um, through their team scores, which is almost impossible to see on this, but Lynchburg and West Union were tied on their day two event. So I'm not sure how they play that out exactly,
Yeah.
but just on their website
Yeah,
has some.
Lynchburg had 3 individuals I had highlighted in my
Mm,
notes that I think are gonna be players to watch for
yeah.
sure.
So, and when you mentioned that with the SEC in golf and with Westfall having to make a decision, now I would say Brungarth is probably still there too because he's still playing as their two. But that day he was their sixth scorer. At the district last year, he finished tied for third. So I mean, I think you have to. It's going to be really interesting because if he's not shooting that well, but he's proven to play at a really high level in the tournament. So, with you know, literally anything could have happened on that day. He
Well,
might
golf,
might have
yeah,
grounded his club or something. Got
yeah.
really strict. So, I
Listen,
mean,
golf is so final. You know, when you go out in football, if you're bigger, faster, stronger, if you go out in volleyball and you're just better over the course of the best of 5, that's probably gonna show up. In golf, if you come out and you hit a ball out of bounds, or if you have a tough hole, or all of a sudden, and now all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're 5 over after 3, you're 5 over after 3,
mhm,
and you don't get a do-over, you don't get a chance
mm,
tomorrow, you don't get it's it's that one. So when these kids advance and these teams advance, there's a clutch gene in there of like you have to be able to go shoot a great score, but you have to go be able to shoot the great
mhm,
score on the day that it's required.
yeah,
And there's something to be said for that. Hey, here's another note too. Taze Valley won the OCC Buckeye Division. I know that's kind of in the extended, but that's pretty high level golf
mhm,
there. And then on the girls' side, I know you highlighted some Latavo, Zane Trace, and Kelly
mhm.
at Piketon. They had some nice rounds this
But
week.
yeah, this
But
one's
but let
nuts.
let me highlight sophomore Avery Ater, Adena shot a 34 school record back on Tuesday. It was in 14 match. Adena McLean Union Zane Trace playing out at Jaycees. From if I looked at the card correctly on the app, she started on hole 1 and made a bogey, which again, that's one of the toughest. 1, 6, and 9 are really tough holes out there on
Come
the front
on. I
side.
talked about how bad I am at the second hole. You're going 6 and 9. Like,
Well, I mean, so I'm not saying that
I
any of them are easy for me. I'm trying to like talk golf on for people that like can actually hit the
right.
ball. So like 1, 6, and 9 are longer par fours. So she starts with a bogey and then she gets going. She birdies 2, 4, and 5. But then she comes back on that par 5 seventh and makes the bogey, if I read that card right. And then must have hit a nice shot in on 8 because that's an outstanding birdie.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, shoots a 34. So congratulations, sophomore Avery Ader of Adine.
That's yeah, it's when I had that sent to me, and I know you did too, is it was just like a that's just an
Yeah.
outstanding effort overall by not only a sophomore but anybody just to play because the front at JC's I believe is to me is significantly more difficult
I
than the
think
back.
so. Not everybody agrees
Yeah,
with that. I think some of your longer hitters, if they work the ball left to right, not to get too technical on an overtime podcast or whatever, but if they work the ball left to right, a lot of times, a lot of your out of bounds on the front side is over off of your left side if you're a right-handed
mm,
player. So, it's some people don't agree with that because the length, if you hit it far, it doesn't bother you. I think on the backside, it's easier because outside of maybe 16, it's not as long. Now
Yeah.
there's more penalty strokes, but again, depending on if you the out of bounds around the backside is over on the right side. So like again, if you're playing that ball left to right, you always feel like it's there. You know what I mean? Where if you're a player that moves it right to left, so every golf course is kind of like in other sports a matchup thing.
Mhm.
It's a if it fits your eye, you'll hear them
Yeah.
say or that type of thing. But if you're good enough to shoot 34, I'd say your eye meets a lot of courses pretty well.
Yeah, and, I will say I definitely always play left to right completely on purpose. Yeah, it's always exactly how I wanna play. Man, I had my footwork fixed one year, and then it didn't stay for long. But you mentioned different courses.
Yes.
So, you're gonna see a lot of different scores throughout, and then track. I'll use track as an
Okay.
example. So, track, when you qualify for state, it's the best times. So
Yeah.
why in golf is it not necessarily the best scores? So like if because I hate it, I'll use the one player getting out. So let's say Ater shoots a 34 and Layla Kelly shoots a 35. Why does one get out and not the other? So if only one person gets out, why wouldn't they use that overall score? Is it just the different courses?
Well, I yeah, from what I understand is there's a set number of people to get out.
Hmm.
So, if it's coming down to a tie and you're not on a team, then they're going to play it off and
Hmm.
you're going to go. I think to your point, what you're saying is you would like to see it a little bit more across the board.
Well, why is it not across the board?
I,
Not
I
is it
guess
is it
yes. To make that, I assume that that's it. They're looking at it more per site because
okay.
again, the courts is different. I think a lot of that is as we grow. I would argue that there's got to be a few more spots available
Mm,
in terms to
it's-
grow the game a little bit. I think especially in an individual based thing. It is interesting though how like in cross country or golf you advance with your team,
mm,
whereas in track you every single event you go
mm,
as an individual, and
mm.
then we watched the recent Cole Miller win state
Yeah,
runner up himself. You know what I mean?
right.
Like in track, so like it is an interesting dynamic. The good news is you have that individual opportunity if your team's not able to play at that level. But to your point, and it goes back to what I said, I think that's why I stamp so many things because it's the district title. Like in
Mhm,
track, you hear regional qualifier. Well, that sounds better. Well, what's that really mean? Okay, it means you went in your district and finished in the top four. Your
mm,
regional qualifier. Where
mhm.
in golf, you're either like a district champion going to the state or you're not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not
Mm,
like these next three teams get to be regional
mm,
qualifiers, or it's not like these next. Maybe that would be the argument is why not have another? I mean, look how early golf's finishing up, and I
mm,
know weather's starting to hit
mm,
here eventually, but maybe the better argument would be why can't golf spread their districts out a little bit more, sectional district, and have a little bit of a regional
mhm,
level that would allow a few more kids to advance and then have an opportunity
mhm.
to go.
So, have you been to the state golf
I have.
tournament? Did you play in it?
No,
Okay, so,
no.
because Adam Breen would have been there, right?
Well, we had some individuals, but
Mhm,
back then when it got to the tournament, we started to meet our match a little bit. And again, it's hard
mm,
to advance in the
yeah.
postseason.
So, when you've been to the state golf, and this is gonna be me being myself on this, if they had another so what other group? How many players are in each group?
Probably four.
Okay, so if you add 2 foursomes, so you had 8 more individuals. How much is that gonna throw off the entire? Because I'm okay with the teams. 12 teams seems okay,
Yeah,
but, like,
yeah.
individually, like, why can't you throw 2 more foursomes in?
You probably can, and
Or even
it's
1 more?
ironic that we're full circle tonight because I mean the answer that's probably pace of play and the way
Mhm,
it goes or whatnot, and you're not wrong. Where you're
mm,
coming from is where the Southeast District has to just catch up a little bit,
mm,
and the state could certainly help in terms
mm,
of now as more and more teams grow,
mm,
and more schools have girls golf and boys golf,
mm,
and the state's becoming more open minded to more divisions. I think we're heading there.
mhm,
Right now, I sense your frustration on that. Because you and I've talked about it over the year, and you're not wrong. You're not. I just think that I think we'll get there. I don't know that we're going to get there as quick as we'd like to. But I think that has a lot to do with it's the logistics. They've tried to stretch it out. A lot of times they'll go on rotation of playing at OSU, the Scarlet and the Gray. They'll go to North Star. I think if they can get a couple more golf courses in play, I think that could go a long way. But I'll also be interested to see if they go, if we won't someday have some version of a regional round as well.
Well, I was going to say, how about a qualifier? Like maybe you win a district, you're going on to state.
Yes.
Your top 4 or whatever, move on to play a qualifier somewhere else, and maybe the winner of that goes. But I just think there's more opportunities for more kids to have the chance, and I don't want it to be like 50 more kids go. But it's just like when you have kids shooting the scores that they do like last year, I feel like that makes it to where they've earned their chance to get there. But when one area gets 6 individuals and another area gets 1,
that's tough.
It's tough, even though those 6 typically finish above that 1.
Yeah.
It doesn't always happen
It
because
is tough.
we had
and what happens is sometimes you don't get the best there because they just had a day. That's why I love your idea of the regional type of qualifier for the state or whatever, because there have been years where I think I use this example on here. There's been years where kids have gone on won district titles to go to the state, and the kid who lost by 1 shot didn't. You know what I mean? Like that's not normal in cross country. That's not normal in track. That's not normal in other individual team sports. And it is tough. So no, I'm not against what you're saying at all. My thought process is we're heading in that direction. It's just going to take probably another 5 years or so for the divisions to establish, to grow, a few more golf courses added into the rotation, and then I think we'll get there.
Well, even if it went to be, hey, we're having this regional qualifier, weather permitting, hey, maybe it just doesn't happen sometimes because of the weather. But I think it would give kids opportunities.
That's the other thing that happens in postseason golf too. Is you get to the end of the year here, golf courses start to play longer. 1, because they're set up to play longer, but 2, the weather starts to change, and that's a dynamic that can really be interesting to follow. So I'll try to break down some courses for our golf viewers as we get closer to there. But again, this is a segment we'll always try to have on here for our golf fans that are tuning in.
Yeah, so that's all we got.
That's all I got.
Yeah, that's all we got tonight.
I'm at the bottom of my screen, so that means I'm done.
Yeah. So you got anything else going on? So
we'll try to get word out. I need to talk to Dewey. Tuesday night we will not be on the air, but Thursday night we hope to, and we haven't even ruled out Saturday yet. Yeah. So we're just we know Friday night will be Wheelersburg at Valley, but Thursday night we hope to be on the air for volleyball, and we haven't even ruled out Saturday.
Happy birthday, Dewey, Tuesday.
Yes.
So not sure anyone's watching, but if you do, just spam them with stuff. So yeah, so we'll see Friday. As we talked about, we talked about Wheelersburg at Valley. We got some really good soccer coming up this week. There's going to be some really good football matchups. We previewed a little bit of Jackson at Ironton, and there's going to be some really good matchups across as well. So look forward to coming back in again next weekend and talking a little more here on Overtime. So
look forward to it.
Yeah. So for Shayne Combs, I'm John Bruce. You've been watching Southern Ohio Sports Authority Overtime, presented by Perfection One. Have a great rest of your week.